We're live.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but tonight we are we starting a new month? Yes, I think we are starting a new month, new theme. So who's going to be hosting tonight?
That would be me.
Step forward, sir. Take us down that deep hole that we know so well.
That rabbit hole.
Yes.
Goes to a different kind of hole that's not appropriate for children.
So, we are starting October, our month traditionally reserved for creepy, spooky, scary kind of movies, with a trip down the rabbit hole in what can only be called the most delightful child-friendly romp ever created from the Lewis Carroll stories. We will be looking at the 1988 Czech film, properly, well, I'm going to probably butcher this because I don't speak Czech, but Nieko Zelenki, which translates something from Alice, or as it is known here in the States, Alice, which simply put on IMDb, a surrealistic revision of Alice in Wonderland. Simple, to the point, said the White Rabbit. So we will be looking, we'll be going around here, getting everyone's first impressions, and I suppose I will start with you, Dave. Is this your first time seeing this particular version of Lewis Carroll's tale?
Sadly, no, but I distinctly remember picking this film up myself at a really cool bookstore downtown, maybe about 8 years ago, and it was. I specifically remember it because this bookstore was like 3 or 4 levels, and then of course, like maybe 3 years ago, they booted it out for a hotel that they didn't even build. So, but other than that, I have mixed feelings about this film because on the one hand, the animation here is phenomenal. On the other hand, it's a snooze fest. So, to me,
what the fuck are you on? That you could think this is a snooze fest. This is too fucked up to be a snooze fest.
It is fucked up, but there are literally next to no words.
So what? That's the best part about it.
For me, I would have preferred that the voices of these other people were other people instead of the little girl. But that's just me.
Said the White Rabbit.
Yes, I think it is.
Enjoy different aspects of this film. Like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with this. On the one hand, I enjoy the creativity, how all the animation works really well. How it almost seems like Norman Bates actually animated this nightmarish.
I could buy that.
Because it starts out with a taxidermied rabbit. So to me, and like I said, I enjoy the different imagery. It's more of a, if you close your eyes and listen to the sounds, you could probably hear all that's going on.
Yeah, the soundscape is great.
So it's more a film that has to do with like sound to me. But on the other hand, it is a very visual film. So the visuals are cool, but for some reason, I just get distracted while watching this film. It's hard for me to sit and watch like more than a few segments without it like going off into different tangents, and it's like its own animal, you know.
Well, but that's the whole point. I mean, Alice
For
in
you.
Wonderland. Well, no, just like of Alice in Wonderland itself, like it does go off and this story as a whole goes off in
Okay.
tangents. It makes no sense, and this captures that wonderfully. And actually, the sequence of events is correct from what I remember, as far as when and things happen. But yeah, that's part of the point, is that it is a series of non sequiturs.
I get it. It's just not my entire cup of tea. So I'm gonna leave it off.
Do you
I
like
love
other Alice in Wonderland
yes,
adaptations?
I love
Okay.
other adaptations. It's just this one. It was just not one that was coherent enough for me to enjoy. So I'm sorry.
Is it because of the lack of dialogue mostly, or just the fact that it is so nonsensical?
Correct.
Both? Or
Both.
okay. Well, I can't help you there.
So does that about sum it up, Dave? Or?
That about sums up my
Okay.
my experience with this. I'm sorry if my viewpoint is negative to a certain point, but you know, I like other aspects of the film, and I'm not knocking it for its creativity.
Opposing viewpoints are a great thing because
Right.
it gives us alternate talking points.
Yeah,
And I don't think anyone.
and I'm not knocking it either. I'm just trying to understand that, so I know where you're coming from.
Yeah. I don't think anyone really thought this movie was going to be a beloved by all. I think we knew there was going to be some dissent in the ranks. But so I guess, Dane, it sounds like you're chomping at the bit to give your impression. So why don't we go to you next?
I guess I am. I didn't really plan it that way, but it just I don't know. I was just like, what Dave said there kind of set me off, because I was like, out of all the movies to be a snooze fest, this is not one of them, because there's too many fucked up things happening.
There's too
in
much
this.
not happening too, so it's.
Are you kidding me? Like there were.
Hey,
Sorry.
in fairness,
that-
Dane, think about the movies Dave watches.
Yeah. Well, but okay. So back up a bit. I'm getting ahead of myself.
Sorry, Dave. I guess that was a backhanded defense.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with whatever I watch because Brandon's enjoyed everything I've brought out. So just about.
Yeah, well,
Sure.
I need to back up a bit here. Okay, so yes, this was a first time watch for me. It had been on my list for quite some time because of the reputation it has, and I, being a connoisseur of dark and fucked up things, of course I had to watch it. And it had been on my list, so I probably would have gotten to it eventually, but it just so happened to work out for this particular event. I watched it, and I mean, Alice in Wonderland as a story is a pretty fucked up story in general, and it's great because of that. Even the animated Disney version, which is probably one of the nicer, more pleasant versions, even that has a lot of just batshit insanity, and there's never a dull moment, because literally the very next thing is some kind of life-threatening, insane thing that is gonna hurt or kill Alice, even in that version. Then you have this, which and I have to praise as a work of filmmaking, it's exceptional, because despite being very seemingly low tech, the stop motion's incredible. It makes great use of its minimalist sets and minimalist props and things like that. It actually reminded me a lot of the Derek Jarman version of The Tempest, because both stories, The Tempest and Alice in Wonderland, are known for being fully outdoors, obviously, but then both that version of The Tempest and this version of Alice in Wonderland are set indoors, and they make use of their location in spite of all that. So that's wonderful. But what really stuck out to me is that because it's set indoors, they make use of all in Wonderland and their indoor versions, but they're all like and they're preserved animals, and everything's in a jar, everything's in a uh everything feels very kind of well subterranean in a way that's like someone's attic or someone's basement or someone's cupboard or something like that. All everything's in a jar, everything's dead, everything's preserved, everything is like barely hanging together. um and it doesn't sound like much when you just say it out loud like that, but you see it. There are so many creatures that are again bits and pieces of little things here and there, that the assemblage of which results in imagery that is truly truly unsettling. And this is coming from someone that doesn't get just about any horror movie you can throw at me. um, Particularly Brandon's beloved White Rabbit, who I'm just going to say right now is scarier than a slasher villain in cinematic history. Not a single slasher villain I've ever seen can even come close to the terror of that White Rabbit. And the White Rabbit has the scissors, and he cuts people's heads off, and it's like, that's a slasher villain right there. Jason wishes that he could be anywhere near as scary as the White Rabbit in this thing. Um, but yes, and I say all this very lovingly because it's not easy to do that to someone like me. So, yes, bravo, good sir, for having made this the way it is. But again, even beyond just being unsettling, it is a genuinely great work of contemporary indoor fantasy and just artistic film, because again the stop motion is incredible. It's so minimalist, but it's so well done. The soundscape is brilliant.
I
It
agree
is
with you. The stop motion is.
Well,
I
and
would,
like you said, the it is a great film to even just listen to, let alone to watch, because the
Mhm.
soundscape is really rich and well done. So yeah, it's incredible. The only little thing I would say, and I mentioned this to Jake, said he didn't notice. So all the close-ups on Alice's mouth as she's narrating the story, you notice that the little girl, she had some dry skin on her lip, and I was just wanting to pick it off because I'm like, oh, that's bugging me. But I
Of
really
all the
so
things on screen.
I know it was weird. I don't know why it just stuck out to me. But so the White Rabbit was terrifying, but the other creature that made me like want to throw up from fear was the frog. The frog page or coachman. Uh, that thing is so disgusting looking that I just was like, oh god, I'm gonna lose my lunch. But I mean that in a good way, because again, it's not easy to do that to me.
Yeah, I
So
mean that
yes,
in a good way.
very high praise from me.
Oh, very good. How about you, Chris? Is this your first go round with this one?
No, I actually saw this back in the 90s. It's bootleg VHS. I was a big fan of, I guess, Svankmajer movies like Little Otique, Faust, Conspirators of Pleasure. Like back then, I saw a lot of those movies like on the VHS days. So I saw it first then. And I guess I liked its dreamlike structure and how it was kind of like the unconscious sort of thing on film. And I liked how they kind of had a lot of the symbolism in there with birth and life and death and transformation and creation and destruction. And I don't know, I thought it was a fascinating movie. I just the way they kind of packed all these different things in there, and it was very much like a dream. And I don't know. I thought that was really. Is anyone getting interference on their sound?
Nope.
Yeah, I feel like I have like a weird It sounds like rushing water or something. Okay, it's gone now. I don't know where it was from, but yeah, I thought it was a really good film. I mean, I love the way it was shot. Yeah, I like the minimalism. I love the stop motion. And yeah, just I thought the lack of dialogue added to it, just in the way it played out. And
Right.
I mean, like I said, I like the filmmakers' other films. They have a similar thing, similar theme, similar feel. I mean, I don't know if anyone else has seen the other films that the guy's done, but yeah, I don't know. I thought it was an
And a few
excellent
short
movie.
films.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He started out with shorts, and I think this was the first feature, I believe, if I recall. Yeah.
I think I was looking at his filmography. It's one of the few features he's done, and yeah, I think it was an early one.
Yeah, I mean, he did
and-
Faust in '94,
I
and then he did
could
Conspirators of
definitely see
Pleasure.
this guy as
Right.
I could definitely see this guy as being a short filmmaker predominantly, just because motion is so agonizing to do because it's so painstaking.
Right.
When
Yeah, I
it
mean, I enjoyed
works
the
like this one did,
surrealist,
then it
the surreal. I enjoyed this. Yeah, like the surrealist style, I guess. Like the Dali, Buñuel, and that kind of. I don't know. He had that kind of his own version of a surrealism, I guess, which I thought that was fascinating. And
I could definitely
Right.
see the Boon. I could see the Buñuel. I could see the Dali influence. You mentioned symbolism there. Correct? Can you? I don't know who can answer this. So, like every time Alice tries to open the drawer, the door, the knob always comes off. There's got to be something there.
Some sort of symbolism. I don't know what
Yeah.
that is, but I agree with you.
I noticed
It
that
happens
too. And
so often.
Maybe
It happens so
maybe
often.
the fact that maybe it's a reference to the fact that eventually, when she meets the Queen, it's warning her that she may lose her head. I don't know.
Right.
Well, one thing I noticed. So yeah, besides the knob always comes off of the desk, but the desks just in general are everywhere, and I would assume that that's just part of the larger aesthetic about how everything is basically the room that
Right.
she's in when the rabbit appears. It's basically that but magnified. So that part I understood, but it was just more so that the fact the knob comes off each time. There's got to be something there, but I leave that open to ponder.
Right. Yeah, that it'll be worth pondering. And I want to throw out here real quick a couple things. One, we got some comments here from Movie Buff One, just checking in, saying that he wants to check out this film. So I guess we're doing a good job so far of showing how odd it is. And I didn't say at the beginning, and my apologies, but Chris kind of mentioned. Jan Svankmajer is the director of this film. And yes, as you said, he's got a long list of shorts and a few other features. But anyway, Chris, did you finish your thoughts, or do you?
yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
All right. Well, if then we'll move on to Forrest. Forrest, was this your first time seeing this film?
Yes, it was. I had never heard of it prior to this show. I've seen, of course, I've seen the Disney version of Alice in Wonderland. I've seen at least a couple different made-for-television versions of the story. But yeah, I had never heard of this. First time watching it. I mean, overall, like, as far as the story is, as far as the story and the plot, it's a very faithful adaptation. But as Jane was saying, very, it's much more minimalist. It's definitely a much more minimalist take. And I do find the stop motion visuals very, very, I don't know if I say well done or just very, interesting. I don't know if maybe it was because I'm watching this as a 30. I was watching this as a 30 something, but I did not find this movie very I don't know, it wasn't very disturbing to me. I guess maybe if I were a lot younger, it'd be a little more creepy or disturbing. But I will definitely agree. But definitely a very surreal. But actually, no. I will say though, one thing as Dane was pointing out, how when the Queen says, orders someone to go off with their head, this director actually follows through on it. We see what happens. I mean, no blood, no blood and guts, but he follows through.
Which I love that as someone that has a soft spot for exploding heads or for beheadings in movies. I was appreciative.
Exactly.
And essentially, the White Rabbit is the sort of like the court assassin in those scenes.
Right.
I'm telling you, man, he's a lot more terrifying than Jason, or Michael Myers, or any of them.
And here he is going from he's worrying about being late and looking for Marianne, and now he's actually doing all the beheadings for the Queen. That's pretty ballsy.
And meanwhile, because he is a taxidermied rabbit filled with sawdust and everything, he keeps having to sew himself up, and then he keeps basically eating his own guts in order to fill himself back up again. It's just delicious.
Yeah, actually, I take that back. I would say it's actually. I think it does have it's definitely has disturbing moments, but definitely not like. But there's definitely some moments that are definitely, I guess gruesome or visceral. Although I don't know. I mean, for me, as far as as far as versions of Alice in Wonderland, I find disturbing. I remember watching that there was at least one made-for-TV version from the 80s that had the Jabberwocky in it. That I remember, and it ended on a cliffhanger.
Oh,
disturbing.
Well, disturbing ultimately is a subjective thing.
I think I know the one that you're talking about where it ended on a cliffhanger, and then it had a sequel to it.
Yeah, it had a follow up movie.
Yeah, Alice Through the Looking Glass was the next one after that.
Yeah.
So.
Actually, real quick, I Forrest, you reminded me of something. This director did make a short film in the 70s called Jabberwocky that was apparently his first stab at this stories.
Oh, really?
And I kind of wish they had thrown that on the DVD. Well, I really wish that had been a bonus feature on the DVD. That would have been great. Like something to look forward to with the Criterion release when it happens. But
yeah. I do, but I did doze off a bit in the middle of this movie, but I wouldn't say it was boring. It's definitely a very unique take on the Lewis Carroll story.
Well, I do find that interesting. That's our second doze off there.
Well, which again, in fairness, I did too, but I'm narcoleptic.
Yeah, no, it's for me. I was just having a hard time. Because I was working all day, so having a bit.
That would make sense.
Yeah.
Well, but the point that I was making with some of the, because again, like we said there, there's whether it was disturbing or not, that ultimately is a subjective thing, admittedly.
Yeah.
And I've said this to Brandon as I was watching it some days ago. I was saying that this movie should be converted into like a survival horror game because it's got the interiors, it's got the claustrophobia, it's got the villains with weapons trying to kill you, it's got puzzle solving. It's like this could seriously be like a Silent Hill game. You really won't have to change that much.
Isn't Brandon? Isn't there a creepy Alice in Wonderland game that you introduced me today?
Yeah, American McGee's Alice.
Yeah.
And for those of you who want to play it, if you've got an Xbox, what was it, Xbox Game Pass subscription, you can actually get it for the modern systems on that. The original one, I originally played that when I got the PS3 version of the game, and it came with a download of the original, which, by the way, is hard as nails. But but
Yeah,
that sequel
I
is
played some.
really awesome. The sequel is amazing, and the imagery is amazing on both ends.
I could almost see this being somewhere between American McGee's Alice in Silent Hill. It's like in that
Absolutely.
cool. It's crazy.
Maybe even a bit of like I could see maybe even a bit of like Johnny the Homicidal Maniac.
Right. But
Or like I thought of PT as well, which is in the Silent Hill universe, but because
Mhm.
I have a PS4 that has PT on it. I was one of the lucky ones to download it when it was still able to be downloaded.
Mhm.
That game is scarier than any movie, anything that I've ever encountered, which is saying a lot for me. But like this film, oh, you could totally do this in PT style, or like Amnesia, the Dark or something, and it would work. Because the creatures are scary enough. The White Rabbit's like main antagonist. There's puzzle solving. There's all that stuff. Inventory. I could totally see it.
I know
Right.
that I definitely did like some of the camera angles, like one of the camera angles where the White Rabbit goes out into the field and you see it from his point of view, right up until he goes to the and jumps in the drawer. Like I enjoyed that aspect of the filmography, you know.
Right. All right. So, Forrest, yeah,
really cool shots in it.
okay. No, I have not seen it. Anyone else? The Alice in Murderland?
I have seen bits and pieces of that movie. I still have to watch that movie all the way through. I'm just waiting for a chance and moment to actually pick that particular film up.
I
Mr.
need to
Movie
order
Buff
a
one.
copy. Definitely need to order a copy of that one
All right.
myself. It's a good point.
All right. And Brandon, I know a little something about your introduction to this, but go ahead.
Well, and also thanks to Movie Buff One for commenting and on air. We don't get a lot,
Indeed.
and it's always good to have that. And of course, when it comes to this film, uh, I remember going to Movie Stop, which was a great
May they rest in
place to
peace.
get movies on the East Coast. You had like a whole bunch of them, and then they just kind of went under. But while it was still going, we'd have like almost weekly trips just to see what was new because you could find some weird stuff. Matter of fact, that's how I got introduced to Evil Bong was at Movie Stop. I was like, oh, this is cool. I've got to check this out. So, it's a lot of cool things that you can find. And I saw this, and at the time, I was collecting every version I could of Alice in Wonderland. I've got a good number of versions of it in my collection. And I was like, oh, this is one I'd never heard of. This looks cool. And I went ahead and grabbed it. And I think I put it on for a movie night of some sort. And I think you were with me when we did that, Jake.
Oh, yeah, I
Um,
saw it when you did.
and it was an experience. Now, I admit, I also fell asleep on watching this the second time. But it was not because I found it boring. It was mainly because I was in the bed when I was watching it. And it was at the end of a long night. So, at 1 or 2 in the morning after you've worked all day, of course it's going to be harder to keep up. But I love the imagery. I love the. I mean, shoot, the White Rabbit itself. I use that as my one of my icons for my channel. For goodness sakes, um, I consider it a very interesting artistic piece, and that surreal nature of it, almost nihilistic feel to the world. As far as Alice in Wonderland goes, it almost comes across as a twisted version of something that they would show on 80s Nickelodeon. Like
What?
I could see this film being shown in Nickelodeon's early days, like in the
Well,
Oh yeah,
80s.
definitely like something they would show between shows.
Like
well,
one of those things, yes.
and I remember other adaptations of tales that were with stop motion animation. I remember there were some very creepy version of Hansel and Gretel that had more nightmarish stuff in it, and there was also one of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, if I remember correctly, from the 80s. That was very surreal in its stop motion animation, and that's why I have a love hate relationship with this one, because I love claymation. I love different adaptations. There's another one that I came across that is like in the Adventures of Tom Thumb stop motion animation. That is more like clay or whatnot. That reminds me down this road.
Adventures of
And
Mark Twain.
Yeah, we still need to cover that.
that one comes to mind too. But me, I just had a hard time focusing this time around, and I had a hard time focusing the first time around. I knew it was a rough watch the first time, and I was expecting the rough watch, and maybe I just have to be in the right mind, where my mind isn't racing, so that I can completely enjoy the surrealism of it. But the two times that I've watched this, it just, I don't know, it just wasn't capturing my attention like I would think that it would, So.
All right. So, do you have any additional ideas, Brandon? Or
Like I say, I love the surrealistic views from the empty field that somehow was in the back of her house, with no apparent wall to her room, to the desk drawers, to the just creepy factor where the stuffed rabbit breaks free and just snaps the nails off with its teeth. These are just things that stick out for me, and I've been looking forward to discussing this uh, artistic and disturbing film with others for a while. Said the White Rabbit.
good deal. All right. So, Brandon left out the funniest part of his story, which is that Movie Stop had frequent anime sales, and we both spent a pretty penny on those. And for whatever reason, who knows why, this was labeled anime, and he bought it as part of the sale. I don't know why, but I do know that this was one that I did watch with him, and it made an impression. It definitely did. We've obviously the White Rabbit has become kind of a running joke since then, but it's been one that I've been wanting to revisit and just never quite got around to it. And then when it finally, I think we've put it forward a couple of times for discussion on this group. And I think when it finally looked like, oh yeah, it's probably about to happen, I went ahead and ordered a copy. In the end, I wasn't able to watch it until this morning, and I too had trouble staying awake, but it was not the film's fault. I am frequently narcoleptic right now. I don't get enough sleep, and so oftentimes will nod off watching a movie, so unfortunately. But mostly I made it through just fine. And it was fun to revisit because this is it's a different movie. I mean, you can definitely see shades of a lot of different influences. We were talking about some painters earlier. One of my favorite descriptions, I love this description, even though I'm not 100% sure its accuracy. I just found it amusing that someone called this Eraserhead for kids, which I just was, that's an interesting thought.
It's
I can
Lynchian,
see
but I wouldn't
that.
call it. I don't know if I would call it, but I don't know if I would. Call
I would
it.
say that it's slightly Lynchian in retrospective.
There's a strong Lynchian quality. I would also say, like, it's almost like someone took. We mentioned Dali earlier, and and Lynch, and let's say someone took those and the films of Wes Anderson, Tim Burton, Guillermo del Toro, Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and the old Rankin Bass films, threw them all in a blender, and because there actually are parts where it reminded me a lot of the stop motion in the Rankin Bass specials, but obviously this is a little bit darker than those generally were.
I would
Now
say
tell,
that it's
tell,
more on the Nutcracker fantasy level.
I still haven't seen that.
see
I
if
need to, but
tell me if
we
I'm
see,
way off on this.
what's
I've
up?
always gotten with Alice in Wonderland as a story. I
Yeah.
have tended to get a sort of child abuse undercurrent vibe from the story. Not necessarily like sexual abuse, but I mean like just in terms of like the way that adults expect children to conform and to behave doesn't make any sense to the child. I mean, that was part of the original impetus was kind of critiquing Victorian culture. But here you almost get the sense that Alice is like neglected in this really run down, horrible place.
You definitely get the sense, and maybe not abuse so much as neglect, although there is the one thing I don't think we've mentioned explicitly, we keep dancing around it, we keep talking about the stop motion and whatever. Alice herself is played by a little girl. She is played in the original by why am I getting this picture here? Okay. Kristina Koholtova, I guess it's that, but voiced in the English by Camilla Power. But almost everything else is a collection of set pieces, taxidermied animals, food, puppets, marionette, all kinds of. It's
Building
a
blocks.
stop motion piece. What's that?
And even she's represented by a doll at one point.
She is represented by a doll when she is shrunken down, which is a really fun part at times. But so essentially, you do have a blend of stop motion and live action. But that first scene, there is an older woman who appears to be probably her sister or something, who does smack her for misbehaving, and then she goes and says, I'm going to tell a story, and then you cut to her kind of half asleep on the floor, and then the story, as such as it is, begins. But
Right,
yeah, this was
right before it begins, though. She says
yeah.
incredibly Alice-y line, which is you have to close your eyes, otherwise you won't see anything.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember watching it with Kim last night. When she said that line, Kim's like, hell no.
So
I ain't closing my eyes for nothing.
I wonder what she thought of the scene with the roaches, but anyway. But this was my second time watching this, obviously, first time in several years. But I should say, in terms of the story overall, I am definitely not a newbie. We were talking before we went on the air about all the different versions out there, all the different riffs on the story. I have read the books by Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There. I think I've read them all the way through once each, about probably 4 years ago, but I probably read bits and pieces before that. But of course, I grew up with the Disney version. There was a TV movie version in 1999, I believe, that I watched when it aired. And what's that?
I said, I remember that one.
Yeah, it was a pretty good one. And there have been several others. One of the only episodes of the British series, The Wednesday Play, that ever has gotten an American home release was the Alice in Wonderland episode, which I do have in the collection. And then we were talking about some of the different anime. There are several anime that it almost feels like it's almost as much of a running gag as the beach episode or the hot springs episode is the Alice in Wonderland episode. A lot of series have that episode. It's a huge thing in anime. It's kind of interesting that they do that. So it's definitely a very, very influential pair of stories. The Tim Burton versions, of course, I actually have a nice cardboard cutout advertisement for the Tim Burton film somewhere in storage. Need to get myself a nice little area to do these filming in, and I can have that on display.
I saw Tim Burton Alice in Wonderland in the theater when I was at Downtown Disney when we were visiting Disney World. So that was 2010. But I was like, oh, that's appropriate, a good pairing of things. And
right.
It was a lot more structured and a lot more kind of your traditional like hero story and everything. But that being said, like for what it is, I thought it was pretty good. It's just not like Alice in Wonderland is supposed to be nonsensical, and it had a structure, but that being said, I think for what it was, I enjoyed it. But it's it's not a non sequitur story like it's supposed to be.
And then it's not 100% non sequitur, but it can be, and that's one of the things that I was kind of a point I'm kind of meandering towards, I guess. But and of course, another major influence on me, as I mentioned to Dane before we started, was in the Batman series where you got Jervis Tetch, the Mad Hatter, and so there's a big Alice influence in that series as well. And so it's definitely been a big thing for me. And one of the reasons I like it a lot, and actually I've made this argument more than once with Brandon regarding certain Batman characters, but there are certain stories that bear different versions. Like there are certain stories that can be adapted again and again, and you can really bring something new and weird and crazy to the story and be within your rights to do so. There are some stories that would be kind of, are you sure you want to do that, man? But there are, you know what I mean? Like there are some that if you do it right, you can almost go in almost any direction. And I have seen a couple of Alice in Wonderland adaptations that really did not do it right. Miyuki-chan in Wonderland being an example there. But this was one that really did go in a different direction. The director apparently was dissatisfied with the idea that most people treat it as a fairy tale. Most people treat it as a sort of whimsical tale of a child learning maybe something along the way. But really, I've always thought of the story as being kind of a fever dream, which is where the Lynch comparison really comes into play. The Disney film is remarkably faithful to the book in many ways, and yet it's pretty trippy, especially by Disney standards. And that is easily the most light and frothy version I think I've seen of the story.
You can
So
definitely tell why, despite it coming out in the 50s, why that version of it got quite a bit popular in the late 60s and early 70s, because that's when and
yes.
I detail this a little bit later in the series Oztober when I talk about a specific Oz adaptation around that
Mhm.
time period. That's when both The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland were getting rediscovered by the drug culture of the 60s and 70s, and they were getting appreciated because of that. Alice in Wonderland especially was prone to that, and that's why you had like the Jefferson Airplane song White Rabbit, and that kind of stuff,
Right.
which is pretty synonymous with psychedelic rock.
And it is a pretty kick-ass song too. But but anyway, so I think that sums up the what I was going to do as a lead in. So this film, as we said, is basically a stop motion set in a basically in a dilapidated house that is full of creepy, crazy, weird looking stuff. I like there's that scene early on where we talked about the scene where Alice follows the white rabbit and he goes into that desk and she goes first of all she slices her finger on a compass trying to get in there, and then she gets into it and you get the Alice tumbling down segment that or wait a minute was this the one where she ended up in the room with the leaves, or was this the dumbwaiter part?
Well, the first part was she ended up crawling through,
Yeah,
and then it led to a room which had a wash basin or a slash like old metal ass
right.
tub, and then she fell into it, and then the bottom
Oh.
caved out, and that's when she
Yes.
went through that elevator sequence where you
Right.
felt like you
Yeah.
were in a mad scientist's lab or something like that, you know?
When she
Right.
fell through the
She's
floor at the end when it hit the ground floor, and then you were in the room with the.
yes.
Well, and then if you
So
notice something, that ceiling just kind of like went back together once she
yep,
fell.
yep. It replenished itself definitely, but yeah, she basically it feels like she's kind of going down a dumbwaiter, and you have
Mhm.
the different levels, and you've got the I think it was the first level was the I'm trying to remember the different levels. I think there was a level that was like all the taxidermied animals and the skeletons and skulls and stuff.
And then some of them seemed like they were toys from her room.
Okay, the toy. I think the toys might have been the first level, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, the toys, and then there was all that creepy ass food, and then there was like the taxidermy and shells and all that stuff, like the basically the dead animals of different types, all the insect collections and all that fun stuff, and that's an interesting sequence that kind of plants the seed, if you will, for a lot of things that show up later. Definitely. What's
It's
up?
got that same concept of Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole.
Yes.
Though I will say when she pulls the thumbtacks out of that preserve jar, it's just like, oh my, that is something.
That's like
Uh,
some Kodachi level cooking there, you know?
well, did you have any
Let's not.
insight as to the elevator scene, Chris?
I'm sorry. What did you say? I didn't.
Did you have any insight into the elevator scene, Chris? I don't know what. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Oh, as far as like the jars and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of took it. It was sort of like the theme of sort of like death and birth, death, creation, and that kind of thing. Like collecting these, like the dead animals, and I don't know. I thought it kind of was. I'm trying to think how to put it, and not putting it very well, I guess. But
I thought it was like, so there's a theme of preservation, and yet also of death, insofar as when we first see the white rabbit, it's a taxidermied rabbit that comes back to life, despite still being taxidermied because he still has his sawdust and everything. He pulls the nails out of his paws and puts on his coat and his hat and everything, which that's very disturbing to start off with. But
I gotta say though,
as
I
you descend though down the dumbwaiter or whatever, as you descend, you do see preservations of animals, but you also see preservations of like fruit and fruit jars and things like that. There's just a constant theme of canning, and she gets the one key out of the sardine can and things like that. But I don't know. I think it really works to create a claustrophobic atmosphere because it is so enclosed.
yeah. And I do want to say, I don't think we mentioned, but I want to say one of my favorite little touches that I actually found kind of amusing was when the rabbit does come to life. I mean, he is at the beginning just an ordinary stuffed rabbit in a glass cage. And he comes to life and he just pulls up this drawer, like the bottom of the cage comes right out. And it's this drawer that has all his clothes neatly folded in it. And he just puts them on, and I found that kind of an amusing little touch. I don't know why. I just thought that was interesting, but yeah.
I think it just goes well. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I was just saying, the jars and all that. I took it too as kind of like the idea of how life recycles, how things feed off of each other. Like something dies, and then different creatures eat different creatures, food. I don't know. I took it as like, it's sort of like how life recycles things. Like things die, they fall down, they break up, they feed the dirt, they feed, and I don't know. That's kind of how I took it. Like that sort of.
That elevator scene is probably one of my favorite in the film, just because I love all of the different items and things you can find in that scene. I would be curious. Do you got the Blu-ray version, Jake? Did it look any cleaner to you?
It's been so long since I've seen the DVD, I couldn't tell you for sure, but I thought it looked good. I mean, I did. I thought it looked quite good. I don't know if they really, really, really went hardcore on a restoration. They probably didn't, but I think it was good. But yeah, I couldn't tell you for sure the comparison. I do know we've talked already about the sound, and the sound was definitely very crisp and clear, and they did a really good job with the audio transfer for it, except that they only had the English dub. I don't know why they didn't have the Czech dub, but whatever. But
it is kind of weird because I watched it on YouTube and it had the original Czech with English captions.
And that's well, I understand that for a long time, long after Brandon got it, it was only available here dubbed, but then they eventually made it available subbed, but I don't know if it's widely available. I didn't really think to look.
Back in the VHS days, if you knew certain catalogs and you ordered, like, I guess the gray market, you could get the subbed version on VHS back then. I guess it was considered sort of like, I don't know, bootleg gray market, but
right.
You could get it back then. Actually, it just wasn't it was like a mail order. If you get, I don't know, back then we used to get like these catalogs with lesser known movies, and you could order them and on VHS and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, back then I believe that they had it with the original language and the subs and all that back then. So I mean, you could. It says on Wikipedia it wasn't available on home video 2011. That's not true.
Yeah. Well, that's what I saw, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say the VHS days. There were certain places that had it, or you could get it. It wasn't common, but it wasn't. It was available in some places. I mean, that's not really accurate when they say it wasn't available till 2011 because I saw it in the 90s the first time, so on VHS. So
Well, and as we all know, Wikipedia is always right.
yeah, it's like IMDb. IMDb has a lot of stuff on there that isn't
Hell,
accurate
I
too.
remember one of my nieces or not nieces, cousins got in trouble for using a book report by using Wikipedia. Got an F on his report. I was like, what the hell?
All right, good times. So, of course, after the tumble, if you will, which strangely enough, she kind of goes down to the dumbwaiter. It's actually not as much of a tumble as it is in most versions. So, in a sense, it was a little less violent. And that seems kind of weird. But
It's a lot
so she ends.
creepier though because it's a
Yeah, it
descent,
is.
and it's
Oh,
like
it is.
it is like a descent into hell in a weird way.
You're right. Well, in a sense, because the different levels could almost be like the different, circles of, or whatever. But she, of course, ends up in the classic small room with the table and the door and
Where she meets
door.
the all-knowing dung heap. No, just kidding.
Well, where she first of all has to deal with a lot of leaves, and then she finds a bottle of ink and does the thing that most girls would do when they find a bottle of ink. Oh, I want to taste this. And of course, that is the thing that okay, I admit I'm trying to remember specifics.
Whenever
That's
I've
the one that makes her
seen
smaller, right?
whenever I've seen adaptations of
Makes her
Alice in
small.
Wonderland, I always get a sense that that there's always like a curiosity killed the cat way
Curious,
about
sir.
Alice.
Curious.
She's very curious about like everything that she finds within this world. So it's no wonder that she gets into trouble because of it, because she doesn't know the rules. She doesn't know the consequences of her actions. But it's just something I've noticed.
Yeah, that's kind of a key function of the character, that she doesn't conform to a world that demands that she behave a certain way, and so thus she gets her wish of a world without rules and a world that is insane.
Right.
And yet, that world also has tyrants and it has authority figures that are bossing her around and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's one of those be careful what you wish for, but it's also a great commentary on how the adult world makes no sense and is tyrannical and is crazy and irrational and that kind of stuff, even when it has the semblance of being put together and that kind of thing. But the
Mm-hmm.
one thing I did observe with this is I don't think I saw the Cheshire Cat anywhere.
Nope, no Cheshire Cat. It's
Yeah, that's
interesting.
true.
No.
What's that?
And was there really a Jabberwocky in here?
No
Well, not in
Jabberwocky.
this one, no.
Not every version of the story has the Jabberwocky.
No, and that's one thing I was going to say. It's one thing that's interesting because you see so many different takes on the story, and some of them draw heavily from Through the Looking Glass. Like even the original Disney version, the original Alice's Adventures in Wonderland does not have the Tweedles. But the Tweedles were in the Disney version, and they've been in quite a few since then. But they were from Through the Looking Glass. And I honestly can't remember with Jabberwocky and some of the others if they were the first or the second book. I can't remember. I want to say The White Knight was the second book. And there's a couple of others that I'm really drawing a blank on that. I know
Well,
Humpty Dumpty showed up in the second one.
Jabberwocky was a separate poem, though.
Right. Well, that's true. That was a separate. But didn't he have like at least a glancing reference in one of them? I can't remember. It's been a while. But yeah, it is interesting and weird. This may be one of the only versions that doesn't have Cheshire, which is very
So
unusual. And
Jabberwocky
especially,
was included in the second book, but
uh,
yeah, so that explains it.
I
Not to
do
be
think,
mistaken by the Jabberwocky film done by the
the
old
Terry
Python
Gilliam.
crew. Yeah, Terry Gilliam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I could see Gilliam doing a full on Alice in Wonderland and making it much more like the original than most versions if he were so inclined. Uh, but, and actually, the whole idea of Svankmajer being very dismissive of how the Alice stories were like fairy tales or whatever, and he thought it should be darker and whatever. Like, I've seen some dark fairy tales. We covered two on this channel. We covered Pan's Labyrinth, which really is a fairy tale and is pretty friggin' dark. And then we did The Lure, which was a very dark take on The Little Mermaid. And
Well, I mean, most fairy tales are dark. That's why they're
yes,
awesome.
I've only read one by the Brothers Grimm, but I have read their version of Cinderella, and it is not
No,
the
it's
Disney
it's
version.
dark because the stepsisters, they get their eyes pecked out, which is awesome.
Well, they also slice their feet up to fit into the slipper.
That's
That's
right, which is
that's
even
like,
better.
yeah,
Nothing like mutilating people's feet for the sake of beauty.
exactly. But which you do get a little bit of mutilation in this because of all the dangerous things that she encounters that cause. It's nothing compared to what one could be led to believe from the film's reputation, but it's she did get that bloodied finger early on, and some of the things that happened to some of the other poor Bill. I mean, but so in this room though, she does shrink. Then she finds the tart and gets much bigger, and then kind of goes through that a couple of times. There's this weird thing that I didn't quite see. I wonder if you guys saw this too. She keeps looking through the door and seeing these scenes, and you hear like waves and all this stuff. And then after she starts crying, it seems like almost like the sea. It almost seems like the room disappears for a few scenes, but then it's back again. Did y'all get that impression? Or
Well, it is Wonderland. It's not really supposed to make sense.
right,
Yeah, sense
but
is not really a part of the
right,
canon there.
and of course, one of the things that happens in this sequence, you can see my icon there, where you've got Alice with the little rat on her head, who's built a fire on her head and is starting to cook supper. And
When he nails
yes,
into her head.
he nails the stakes into her head. He puts down rocks. And really, what was the thing that sent her over the edge? Was it him lighting the matches? It was,
I think
It was
so.
actually lighting the fire itself
yeah.
because he
Okay.
cut her
Yeah.
hair, put it down
Yeah.
there, and then once her hair was on fire, she even let it burn for a short bit. And then she was like,
Yeah.
as he's cooking up and he's adding the rice, and she's like, "Okay, that's it. That's the final straw."
Yeah.
Down
Yeah,
her
like,
head.
That's too much.
what was your first clue? Did you think it was just a particularly bad headache?
Right. So I just found that kind of amusing, though, that she let it go on until that point, and then she just like, I'm over this, and just dunked her head, and the rat, of course, swims off and like in a hurry. Somehow everything bundled back up in his trunk all at once, and then I think this was sort of the White Rabbit returned, and and Alice manages to get out of the room. Of course, That's this is she's a doll at this point. Yeah, when she gets out of the room, she's the doll. And I gotta say that was an interesting doll they used as the shrunk Alice. It was a pretty good likeness for the most part, but it was also kind of creepy. And I imagine that Forrest, what you said, you're probably right. Watching as an adult, but I'm sure if a kid was watching this, they'd probably be like, It'd probably be a nope. But anyway, anyone have any fun thoughts on those sequences or anything they want to jump in on?
Well, the whole so part of why the White Rabbit in this film is so terrifying, beyond the fact that he keeps spilling sawdust, he keeps having to sew himself back up, he keeps essentially eating his own guts to fill himself back up again. Besides all of that, and the fact that he has scissors, so he's got a slasher villain's weapon, um, the clicking sounds that he keeps making are really
Oh yeah,
disturbing. Like,
oh yeah.
again, you talk about like the Predator, and it's like bullshit. This thing is a lot scarier than the Predator.
And
And
those
that,
big bug eyes.
yes, the eyes and the teeth, and it's like, oh man, but just the clicking sounds he keeps making are just, oh, they get under your skin. Um, and I think it's that plus the fact that like as is true to all of the other Wonderland characters, they're always one sentence or one wrong move away from snapping, and that's pretty traditional for the Wonderland characters. It just so happens in this version that they're even more on edge, and the White Rabbit is like homicidal for the most part. Sometimes not all the time, because like again, there's that one bit where he confuses her for someone else. But it's just that to me is what distinguishes. That's an important distinguishing factor of the Wonderland denizens versus the Oz denizens, because those Oz characters, they tend to be rather childlike themselves, and they have the political infighting, they have some darker aspects to them, but they're not like unhinged in the way that the Wonderland characters are. But again, that's part of the point. It's the idea that there's insanity and malice and uh, terror underneath the facade of respectability, which again, I think that's a lot of what Lewis Carroll was going for. I suspect.
Good deal. Dave, you look like you were about to pop in with something.
I always liked the before we go further, the introduction to the rabbit, where he just busts out the cage, and but a little bit before that, where you see him like pick up this drawer where he's got like these gloves and whatnot, and he just dresses himself in sawdust trail or not, just keeps on going, So I always thought that part was unique to the rabbit, since you're talking about his clicking sounds. Not only that, his etiquette,
Right. He may be a murderous psychopath, but he has manners.
That he does, and that's very indicative of the Wonderland characters in general. But which again, great commentary on just Victorian England in general. It was or was it Victorian, or was it? I forget. I'm probably getting my time periods mixed up. But point is, it's a great commentary on the fact that again, malice and hatred and insanity can lurk underneath the veil of respectability.
Dan, I think you are right that it's Victorian. The book originally came out 1865. I believe that was in that time frame.
I'm double checking. So
All right.
her Queen Victoria's reign. So it says from 1837 until her death in 1901. So yes, it would have been Victorian.
All right.
I couldn't remember. I knew it was in the later part of the century. I just couldn't remember how early it was. But yes, the and again, you see that even with Jack the Ripper, which is of course later on in her reign, but that's kind of the ultimate kind of diseased heart of Victorian English society spilling out. But you see even the seeds of it in the world of fiction with Alice's Adventures in Wonderland.
All right. Forrest, I haven't heard much from you. Do you have any thoughts on this little segment or what we've done up till now?
Thoughts on this segment?
Yeah.
On the this is on the queen. No, not on the queen.
But just like the early parts, like getting into Wonderland, the going down the rabbit hole, the Room of Tears, and what have you.
Well, I mean, I thought that was pretty well. I mean, actually, I think that part was very well done. Was very well done. Given how the director did with limited resources, and or for example, when Alice is in the White Rabbit's house. I kind of like how it's how it's
Right.
like how he used how he just made the house from building blocks as opposed to like
Right.
models or sets. I thought that was pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, that was a pretty fun touch.
I agree with that. I think it's interesting that she was able to climb up there without having it, without having it collapse. That was
Right.
also something I thought was interesting.
Well, of course, once she's inside, it's a proper house. It's just the but outside,
Yeah.
it's building blocks. Yeah. Which is another example of that Wonderland logic. I use the term loosely at work. Like another thing that I find interesting, I think I've always found interesting. This film does the same thing the Disney one did, and a lot of others do, is when Alice starts crying in that room.
Yes.
She does not. It's like as much waterworks as she puts out in that scene. It makes you wonder, like, is this a regular thing for her?
Well, she keeps she keeps doing it to the point where even her giant form is overwhelmed by the water,
Right.
which is.
I guess you could call her the original crybaby.
You could do that. You could, but it's like it makes you wonder because it's like, it's you almost think that that nothing in her room is probably dry. That she probably.
Well, her room was a mess.
That kind of gets to that neglect thing that we mentioned, but the so here's another random observation. So besides the dry skin on her lip that I observed, the other thing I observed, so the rat or whatever it is that is on the rowboat there, and it sets up camp on her head and all that stuff, gets water from the tears that she shed, and I'm like,
and uses it for soup. Yeah.
yeah. Well, but what I'm thinking of is like, how salty that would be. I mean, because tears have salt in them because it's it's a saline thing and it's a natural fluid and all that, but it's not.
Right.
It is salt. The tears are salty, and so then presumably there's that many tears in the water. It's equivalent to salt water. I don't know if it's probably less salty than salt water, but it's enough to do the job, and especially when there's that much of it. So he's taken the water from his surroundings and is using it to make soup, and I'm like, man, they tell people who are, lost at sea and have very little water and everything. They tell them don't drink seawater because it'll dehydrate you, and it does, pretty severely. And I'm like, man, that is the last thing this rat wants to be doing, is because he's gonna be so dehydrated, and it probably
Right.
wouldn't even taste good either. Because it's like, yeah, if you're making soup, don't use that.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that did give me a chuckle when I saw that. I had kind of forgot about that part, but yeah. After they go, she goes tumbling down the stream, and so does the white rabbit. And then this is where the rabbit mistakes her because she's in doll form. Mistakes her, I think Marianne, I think is what he calls her, and
Yeah.
tells her, "Oh,
Harry,
I lost my scissors. You need to go find me some more scissors." So she goes up to the house to get him, which of course he has a whole drawer full of scissors, which fits into Dane's serial killer idea for this character.
yeah, other versions he's looking for his white gloves.
Right. And of course Alice has another run in with certain edibles that cause her to get bigger and smaller, or specifically bigger. They didn't really go as far as they did in most of the other versions I've seen, where she basically was busting out of the house. You kind of got the impression here that when she attacks them, it's almost more her being spiteful. Like before, it was more they were getting attacked incidentally in most of the versions I've seen. But of course, the rabbit brings in all his friends, including Bill the footman, who
His hell
Oh,
spawn.
my
yes,
friend.
all his friends, yes,
Those
and
things are seriously creepy. Like, I don't know,
yes,
they got to me.
they were creepy. It was almost like someone just rummaged through a whole bunch of weird random skeletons and knickknacks and threw them together, kind of
And then had
willy
them be
nilly.
possessed by demons because they're really that creepy.
Pretty
And then
much,
they all
yeah,
start attacking her in the house, and they want to kill her. And
yeah.
again, I'm like, this thing is scarier than most horror films.
It's
Yes, it
like they
was good
took the
times.
toys from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, deer, the toys that were from the Misfit Island, and attacked Alice in here.
So the misfit toys got their revenge, or tried to anyway.
You know, Charlie in the box.
Right. Well, like I said, there was a little bit of a Rankin Bass flavor, and that's probably part of the reason I was thinking. Anyway, so eventually, they send in Bill, who goes in through the chimney, and he gets his butt kicked right back out, and he lands and splits and spills uh, sawdust everywhere. And then we have those great scenes of everyone trying to save his life. You got the rabbits sewing him up, and then they've got a little funnel and they're putting the sawdust back in. It was actually kind of amusing, even though it was creepy. It was kind of amusing, creepy. It was weird. But Alice tries to sneak out, but of course they see her, and you know, after the
Again, they're like having to feed him his own guts,
right.
essentially.
I think in much of this scene, Alice was in her narration saying, "Screamed the animals," or "cried the animals," or "said the animals," or whatever. I think we touched on this, but like the one thing about the structure of this film that irritates some people and amuses others, and I am amused, is the narration, where you basically have Alice doing almost all the narration herself. it's usually in the form of she'll make a statement and then she'll say, said the white rabbit, or sighed the white rabbit, or cried the animals, or something like that.
I guess
Or
my
said the king, or said the queen. What's that?
I guess my biggest complaint about that is the fact that she didn't even try to disguise her voice as anything else. It was just you couldn't fully tell whether it was whether you could tell that it was Alice's voice, and I wish that maybe she would have like found like a way to express the different characters when she was.
I love the fact that she didn't do that for the simple reason that they're all her, and that it's all coming in its own way. It's all coming from her subconscious and from her own perspective. And so, because if it had been the way you suggested, then it would be more like almost like story time with Alice, and I think that might have missed the point in a way. Because like, again, I got the sense that all these characters were all coming from her own subconscious, and they were all kind of reflections of some part of her. And plus also, when people typically do that sort of thing, so a lot of people are not good at like what you're describing. That would be good if they were good storytellers or if they really got into it. Most people aren't necessarily like that, and that's kind of to their own detriment. But the fact that she didn't disguise her voice or anything, I think that was actually thematically very appropriate for this. Because again, I got this sense that this was like a neglected child trying to make sense of her surroundings and to try to formulate some kind of meaning in an environment that really has none, or in fact there's an even darker heart at the heart of this thing.
I got the feeling of neglect as well from her background, and I think that that's kind of why she invents this Wonderland, is because she's so bored, so neglected, that she's got to invent her own world, and at a very young age, a child can have a very big imagination.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's part of the charm of the Alice in Wonderland story.
Well, and I might throw in there, well, for sure neglect. I might even throw in there possible abuse as well, whether physical, sexual, mental, some combination thereof. Because again, I always got a sense of abuse from the Alice in Wonderland story. You could argue just almost like a abuse of authority towards children just in general, which is even more common, and especially in that time period. But I always got that sense.
I always got the sense that having a wild imagination was a sin against all nature back in this time. Children were supposed to follow in their lines of their parents and obey all rules.
Exactly.
Well, the whole be seen but not heard sort of deal.
Exactly.
That sort of thing.
Which went as far as the wives as well.
Which actually might also, if you're thinking of that as part of the subtext for this, then thematically, one of the other things that I loved about the narration that, again, not everyone liked, and as Dane pointed out, it kind of showed certain potential, I guess, hygienic issues or what have you. But the way that she'll say something, and then when she said the, cried the, whatever, you get this super close up of her lips, just mouthing the words. And I don't know, I just found that very amusing. I don't know why. I just find that very amusing. It's weird, it's different, but
yeah, well, it treads the lines. Again, most of this movie is disturbing intentionally. So I would argue that those close-ups on her mouth are kind of in line with that in a weird way, but it kind of goes past disturbing and kind of comes back around to being a little amusing for the simple reason that you could do exactly what you have done and insert it into everyday speech, and then it kind of becomes funny. It becomes a running gag of sorts. Um, and because she does it rather melodramatically, and I suspect again for intentional dramatic effect. But yeah, that did stand out to me too, and because it's done so often, which is another reason why I like the fact that there's hardly any dialogue in this, because A, it makes it more of a visual and auditory exercise, and B, it makes it more universal, which I'm sure is particularly important given that it is made by a Czech director in the Czech language. Although it was a multiple country film, if I remember, a multi country production. Um, but it helps to bridge that gap, and I know that that's even more important when you're dealing with several countries that come together to make a film. That's even more important to do, and so just the fact that it didn't rely on the dialogue so much, even though there are a lot of memorable lines in Alice in Wonderland, a lot of deliberately nonsensical lines also. The fact that it didn't have those things, it helped to make the tension, the dramatic tension in that version of Wonderland, which again is so not particularly wondrous. It's very claustrophobic. But again, the effect is so strong for what it's trying to be, um, that you can't help but really admire it.
I'd like to say that this film very much reminds me of like sitting through a visual Rorschach test. Because to me there are different shapes and different images that you can take take it with whatever interpretation that you want from it. I mean, you can take it from several different standpoints if you want. Like Chris, you mentioned birth and rebirth, birth and things of that nature. I, I'm glad that you mentioned that because it makes me look at this a little bit differently. So I didn't take that from these first two times that I actually watched it. So maybe I'll have to look at it through those eyes.
I did find the stuff at the end to be kind of weird. Yeah, you mixed the queen, but you also had the weird thing with the socks and the or worms. Well, I guess that was the caterpillar.
Yeah, it was the caterpillar.
With just so many oddities.
Yeah.
That caterpillar with the teeth. Oh, those teeth.
It was more like a Mr. Ed.
I'd rather see Mr. Ed's dentist than deal with that thing.
That whole sequence was very weird and very unusual, and it was interesting. And then just real quick, I want to throw out again, as far as the actual origin, Czechoslovakia, Switzerland, United Kingdom, and West Germany apparently all were together on this one. But yeah, and Dave, to your point, like I said before, this is a story that bears multiple interpretations. And yeah, I do think that the original book could almost be seen as sort of a literary Rorschach, which is what's yielded such random redos and remakes of it over the years. But I want to go ahead and ask, I think it was around this point in the film. I'm going to be honest, this was about the part where I started losing focus a little bit. But I believe it was around this point where we get to see this film's version of probably the most iconic secondary characters, the Mad Hatter and the March Hare. who in this one, rather than having a tea party, they're basically playing a card game. But what is y'all's take on that sequence, or at least their initial intro?
I was a little out of all the characters in this story, and there are many, many memorable characters to be sure. So the white rabbit they blew out of the park, or they blew out of the water and knocked out of the park, however you want to say it. They did a great job with that character because he's so distinct and so memorable, and he's in it a lot and that kind of stuff. Then you have other interpretations like both the animated and the live action Disney versions where the Mad Hatter is really, really memorable and really prominent, particularly the Tim Burton one because it's Johnny Depp and all that stuff. Um, but yeah, point being, very memorable, very prominent, very iconic to look at. And the animated one is Ed Wynn, and he's got a very memorable voice. This Mad Hatter and this March Hare, not nearly as much to write home about with them, outside of the fact that the March Hare is in a wheelchair, which is kind of disturbing in its own way / tragic. But yeah, this I know I like the fact that it's a puppet for the Mad Hatter. Um, and I like the fact that the March Hare's eye keeps coming loose and they have to tie it back off and that kind of stuff. I like all that. I was just surprised at how kind of de-emphasized they were, considering how many other interpretations put them pretty front and center and make them very memorable, particularly the Mad Hatter. And even in the ancillary stuff that we mentioned, like with Batman the Animated Series, he's his own character and a
Right.
particularly memorable one in that series, even though that's not really an adaptation per se. But
Right.
yeah, but out of all the characters, I mean, even the King and Queen of Hearts, who we'll get to in just a bit, they're done in a pretty cool way in this. All the card characters are done really, really well in this.
That I agree with. A lot. I mean, some of that was so next level, especially with the Queen coming out of the cards,
Yeah,
and some of that animation that went afterward, where you saw both King and Queen outside of the cards.
but then it's like out of all the characters, for this particular thing, it's like those are like some of your stars next to Alice herself.
Hmm.
Well, particularly the Mad Hatter, and yet they feel a little bit comparatively phoned in, particularly although maybe because by this point we've seen so many other hellspawn in the form of these other animals and strange creatures and stuff, that by this time it's like, oh, that's nothing. There are a lot scarier things in this by that point in the story. But yeah,
Right.
that did come across as a little weird to me and a little disappointing because the other ones I've seen, and again, this is before I'm going to be taking my own deep dive into these other, because I'm sure there are probably ones where they phoned it even more, and there are probably other ones where they're even more of a standout than Disney. I don't know, but point is, relative to all the other creatures that are such standouts in this because of how disturbing they are, it seems like a lost opportunity for those two.
Right, and I actually I'm more or less agree. The first time I saw it, I think my reaction was, that's it. Like, I kind of was a little surprised and disappointed. Of course, the second time they come around, they get beheaded by the White Rabbit, and then they just lean over, pick up their heads. They each pick up the wrong head and put it on, and just go back to their card game. And I did find that kind of amusing because that was sort of like the whole change places, but change heads. I thought that kind of made some sense, but it could be that they were intentionally downplayed because they were such a big part of the Disney one, or because they were so well known. Maybe kind of like with Cheshire being left out altogether, they probably. So it's kind of interesting,
And maybe
but
their changing of heads and just putting them back on was to show you that maybe losing your head according to the Queen, is not all that bad in this world of Wonderland that Alice has created, because of the fact that this world is so weird. And I think that some of the dangers that she thought or interpreted were not as bad as the world let on. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Okay. And Brandon, it looks like you're trying to say something. Am I right on that? Or
Well, yeah, I remember. I admit, when I got through this the second time, by this point it was a little bit hazy. But again, it was probably close to 3 in the morning.
Wow.
I remember the hedgehog scene where they were doing the croquet, and they actually turned the balls into literal hedgehogs.
Right.
And I also liked how they used that, and they kind of cut the figures directly out of the cards during the scene. But having that image with the white rabbit with the scissors coming after you, I don't know, that's a haunting image for me.
Especially at 3 in the morning.
Not a single
Right.
one of those hedgehogs was blue, and not a single one of them had to go fast. Movie ruined.
Right. So of course around this part we do have the scene where you encounter the king and the queen, and they're going around, doing their usual off with their head. The king's looking at what it looks like they're looking at the script, really. No, dear, not yet. We have to try them first,
There's
And
procedure first.
Yes, there's procedure first.
The way that they treat the king and queen in the original animated Disney version, I remember really loving how teeny tiny the king was, and how
Right.
he didn't even try to fight back against his absolutely psychotic wife. I thought
Right.
that was great. And then they preserve that dynamic in their own fashion here, just not quite as Disneyfied, obviously.
I do think they're a little more evenly matched here, but there is still the clear sense that she wears the pants in that arrangement.
I do like that it is far closer to them being a part of real cards and a part of their
Right,
kingdom of cards than some of
right,
the other adaptations. So that's a really
right,
cool concept.
right. And then we have that nice little sword fight between the two knaves, I think it was.
Yeah,
And
that's one of my favorite parts, actually, because the sword fight itself
right,
is really, really well
The
done.
shadow puppet.
Yes, and then when they get their heads cut off, it's so shocking because, again, that's like the first. They always say "off with your head," and then they finally do it, and it's like, oh, awesome! We finally get to see this happen. But again,
right,
but again, it is Wonderland, so when they do get their heads cut off, it's not the worst thing that can happen to you.
right. Hmm. Sorry about that. So anyone else have any thoughts on this little section here? The big so-called trial slash croquet segment.
I just think it was kind of funny that those things that she was being told that she had eaten or whatnot, they were originally rocks to begin with, which were they crumpets or strumpets or
Yes, they were strumpets. Well, if it's in the Victorian era, it could be.
Well,
But I think they were tarts.
yeah, tarts.
Traditionally tarts.
So originally, Italy, before she even
Strumpet
ate
by
the
any
tarts,
other
I
name.
believe they were rocks. first, and then they turned animation wise into the tarts. So
You got your tarts, you got your strumpets, and then once you get to Jack the Ripper era, you get your full blown prostitutes. You got it all.
And one thing also, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, they held true on this, that has been a part of several of the other productions, is I find it amusing that they keep accusing people of eating tarts that are right there in front of them. Like, you ate these tarts. It's like, no, you have it on the plate right there. And that was maybe I'm remembering that scene wrong, but I feel like that was part of this one. I always
well,
find that kind of
I like
amusing.
that. I like that Alice at one point is just like fuck it, and she goes and eats them all, like right in front. I think that's actually kind of important because at that point it's like, fuck this insanity, fuck these arbitrary rules in this world that doesn't operate by any sense of logic. And that's just kind of her rebelling against the system, pretty much, and but also the kind of the sham of that court, quote
rebelling
unquote.
against authority, maybe.
Yeah,
Even.
exactly.
Mhm.
But also, I like the fact that I think that's pretty indicative of her character and at that stage of where she's at this point in the story. And then so she doesn't want to eat anything, and then she just goes for it. And then meanwhile, I'm thinking of like Anthony Anderson in Transformers. I ate the whole plate, the whole plate. So you would have gone for it.
Right. So, and that pretty much, like you said, once she kind of says, "I'm over this," that's kind of the end of it. She wakes up and
Was.
yeah, she wakes up and roll credits. And one notable thing
that's not entirely true because the rabbit's still gone, and then she's contemplating cutting his head off, and I'm like, yes, kill that son of a bitch.
Which is an interesting adaptation, since most adaptations end with her waking up right next to her aunt or a nanny. It was never her sister. It was always either her aunt or nanny or mother.
And her cat Dinah.
That too. Next to the bank, like she'd fallen asleep listening to the story told by her. So
right. So yeah, there was a couple of things that followed her from the dream. That's true. Well, but and then we mentioned
if Alice knew, because I assume that Alice is at least somewhat well-to-do, if not an aristocratic girl, which would make sense given how many rules she's expected to follow and all that kind of stuff. Given all of that, do you think that if she were to ever meet Dorothy, who's like poor and American and rural and all that stuff, do you think they would get along, or do you think they'd hate each other's guts? Because you know that Toto would chase Dinah around. You know that.
Hard to say. Well, yeah, kind of hard to say. I'm not sure I would say this version of Alice seems to be an aristocrat, given how dilapidated the house appears to be. But I
was gonna say she looks like more of a refugee from like a war-torn.
I mean, in general, though. This is the Czech version of Alice, and I mean, we know that at the time it was Czechoslovakia, not the Czech Republic, but we know that region of the world has been through a lot of stuff.
I think it could be said that it's pretty clear that the Disney versions, both the animated one and the Tim Burton one, I think you could say pretty clearly that she's more, if not aristocrat, then at least upper middle class. Like, she definitely comes from the sort of background where you expect there to be quite a bit of rules and expectations.
I bring it up because so I read Alan Moore and Melinda Gebbie's Lost Girls, and they combine Alice with Dorothy and with Wendy from Peter Pan. They smush them all together into one time period.
It must be painful.
Quite the opposite, because there's I mean, it is a pornographic comic, so that's quite the opposite of pain. It's a lot of getting it on with literally everyone in the piece. But it's Alan Moore, so it's a lot deeper than that. But point being, that version of Alice there is a very wealthy, aristocratic, older woman. She's the oldest of the three women, and they're like full grown at that point. She's the oldest one, and then Wendy is like kind of middle class housewife who's heavily repressed, and then Dorothy is like a poor rural American. She's the only American of the three women, and because it's Alan Moore is obviously very, very British, and so his dialogue for Dorothy's makes her sound like she's from Texas or something. It's like Kansas people don't have that thick of an accent. Sorry.
Right.
I love you, Alan Moore, but you understand your own countrymen really well, and like a general American accent and American dialect. But I'm like, no, that version of Dorothy sounds like she's from Texas or from the South or something.
That sounds interesting, I suppose. The and actually talking about, I still need to read The Wizard of Oz. I have also read Peter Pan, so that's another one where I can comment on the adaptation, and that one bears looking at one of these days, at least one version or another of that. But because that had some differences from the source material as well. But one thing I do want to mention, we talked repeatedly about the sound in this one. One thing that's very interesting is that the music is also very minimal. They basically play a simple piano piece, if I remember correctly, over the opening and ending credits, and that's it. Like, that's basically all the music. So you pretty much are left with the sound effects and the minimal dialogue, which probably doesn't help make it a super exciting film, but it does help with that sense of kind of creepiness and loneliness and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's
very
interesting.
stark.
Yes. And I think it's quite effective. And actually, it'll be a good segue. I think overall, we've talked, a lot of people have commented or complimented on the stop motion animation, but let's say just generally with the animation, the music, the production generally. What are y'all's thoughts on this one overall in terms of the full production picture there?
I liked this, the world that was crafted here. It was very different from what I'm used to. I think prior to us going online, we were talking about Alice in Wonderland adaptations. There was one called Malice in Wonderland that was also a very creative twist on the movie series. I might even have to watch that when I go upstairs tonight, or watch part of it. It's it's really interesting to see something that is still fantastical, still follows the book in many ways, but also comes across very differently. I mean, this world is stark. You could see it's almost a ruined world. When you leave Alice's bedroom, it's like half of her wall is missing, and what's left is this barren wasteland with nothing but a desk in the middle. All of the jars of items, all of the dirtiness, the dinginess. This itself lends to a very different feel, and I love that. I think it's really neat. You don't see that in other things. In
You
other
could almost say the world has moved on. All right, anyone else?
As far as production wise, I liked the stop motion animation aspect of it. I did like how dark it went at times. Like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with this one. I feel like I definitely have to be in the right mood to watch this and really enjoy it. and maybe I just haven't been in the right mindset to watch it and appreciate it the way that others do. But that being said, I did like the world in which that we find ourselves. It is very dingy. It is very dirty. It is very unkempt, and I think a lot of that is due to the neglect that her room was in total disarray. As if the child had been playing there for hours with no one like watching her, and then she just created her own imagination nation.
It's almost how I remember the '80s. I don't know why, but that's my memory of how the '80s looked growing up.
Interesting. So here's an observation that I had, and I brought it up when I brought up the Derek Jarman version of The Tempest, which was set indoors. Similarly, this version of Wonderland is so heavily indoors. It is kind of the opposite of what we expect, because Wizard of Oz, same kind of thing as Alice in Wonderland, where you have character established in an outdoorsy environment, but still in a home environment. It's their backyard, it's their whatever, it's familiar. They go inside, whether it's to escape the tornado or to go down the rabbit hole, go inside something, and then they come out of the interior to this fabulous exterior of this fantasy world full of all these fascinating, bizarre characters and things like that. But then here we've got starting outside, continuing outside, then there's a desk, and then it's all interior from there. And in fact, it just goes further down, down, down into even more claustrophobic interiors. And so the Wonderland part of it is, just how far down in this like basement kind of environment can you go? Which again, that totally subverts our expectations, and yet the strangeness that's supposed to be Wonderland is preserved, quite literally preserved, because it's full of jars and cans and sardine cans and all that kind of stuff. So that's a pretty interesting subversion of our expectations, and I really appreciated that. Although I'm not especially certain as to why any little girl in her right mind would want to drink ink to make her shrink. And I didn't mean for that to rhyme, but it just came out that way anyway, so whatever. I don't know why anyone would do that, nor do I know why your first instinct when you open up a sardine can that has a key in it, I don't know why you would lick the key to get what I'm sure is sardine juice off of there. And it's like, maybe because I don't know if she's starving or what, but it's like my first instinct when I see a key is to not to put it in my mouth, and especially not if it's got sardine juice on it. So that was a little bizarre, but but I love that subversion of our expectations of what exactly constitutes Wonderland.
But everybody loves to drink sardine juice. That's like America's favorite.
It's
That's
up there,
right.
up there with clam juice, which is a
Oh
real
yeah.
thing that you can buy.
Yep. Yes, it is. Chris, how about you? What are your thoughts on the overall production?
I liked the kind of sort of the organic kind of feel, and it kind of had sort of like almost like a primal feel, like with the bones and all that, like sort of, I don't know, like I don't know how to explain it. Uh, Losing train of thought. Sorry. It it had that sort of like primal feel. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre with like the bones and just the way everything is. Like, I don't know. I'm sorry. My mind's so worn out right now. That's not putting things correctly.
That decaying beauty of the world, I would say. I mean,
Yeah,
all the
that kind of.
skulls, great things.
Yeah, the kind of had that. Yeah, like primal, like it kind of lent itself sort of to being kind of like, yeah, like the unconscious and the dream world. That's sort of like primal. I just, words are escaping me at the moment. I don't know.
That's
Guess I'm
understandable.
worn out or tired, and I don't know. I'm not articulating very well.
Yeah, understandable. Egan, how about you, Forrest? What are your overall thoughts on the production of this one?
I like it. It's very I like it's it's dingy. It's uh very creative. Very creative with the use of different household household items to create this world. Um, like the taxidermy white rabbit. Um, yeah, it's definitely it's. I don't know what else I could put else I could. But yeah, no, I definitely overall the production design is very well. It's very well done.
Okay.
It's unique. It's like I don't want to keep using this word, but it's unique. That's all. I mean, that's just all I can say about this version of the story. Um,
It's special.
especially yeah,
It is a rather unique film. I'll grant you that. It is one that you don't see a lot like it. All right, so I guess we're up to favorites. Does anyone have a particular character, scene, what have you? That it looks like we lost Chris, unfortunately.
I will.
We'll go ahead.
I will have to say the beheadings. This is the only version of Alice in Wonderland where the Queen calls for people for Wonderland's residents to meet to calls for off with their heads, and the director follows through on it.
Right. How about you, Dave?
I would have to say that my favorite scene would have to be when the rabbit was when we first saw him dressing. I just like the fact that even after he dressed, he just kicked the drawer back and it was just back in place. It was just a very unique way of showing stop motion animation. And like I said, the stop motion animation is like the one thing of this film that he got right. I mean, all the way through. It's not that it's a bad film. It's a masterpiece of puppetry and the way things move. And I just get a kick out of that and anything that has to do with the stop motion animation.
All right, sounds good. How about you, Brandon? What are your favorites in here?
My favorite scene is obvious on this one. It's the elevator. I mean, the imagery, everything going down. It just is a really cool scene.
Yeah, that almost felt like it was like kind of like a mine shaft elevator, almost.
Right. I could see that.
I agree with Jacob on the
dumbwaiter.
dumbwaiter thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
A mine shaft or a mind shaft in its own weird way because it's
It
very
could be.
cerebral.
Yes.
But
All right. How about you, Dane?
Jeez, that's so tough. Like so many moments stand out. Okay. Well, I do agree that the elevator scene is probably the one that lets us know shit's about to get real, if we want to think of it that way, just because we see little flashes of the world that we're about to enter. And it helps to set the tone very nicely. I think the beheadings, like we mentioned, those actually deliver what was promised by so many adaptations. It's like, yeah, we want to see some heads roll, quite literally. So we get to see that, which is nice. Any time that the white okay, so the two freakiest moments, how about that? Because I mean, pretty much so many scenes are memorable, it's so hard to pick favorites. Freakiest scenes to me are when the white rabbit first comes to life. I think that's actually pretty terrifying,
Hmm.
pulling out the nails and shit. And actually an offshoot of that is when he first kind of tries to sew himself up and is trying to fill up his sawdust again and that kind of stuff. Um, and then actually, you know what? I think I do have a favorite when the animals are attacking her in the house, because you get so many freaky looking animals all at once, including the white rabbit. Um, so that actually might be my favorite scene, just because it's got all of them all together. I think the scariest, beside the White Rabbit's the scariest for the simple reason that he's got the most screen time. But as far as like the ancillary characters, the scariest is probably that frog. When that thing came out of the house with the crying baby, and I tend to find the crying baby sounds to be pretty like unsettling anyway. Um, and like even in real life I don't like it. It puts me on edge. And then that thing comes out with that the big tongue and the eyes and the its skin, and it's like I don't particularly like frogs in real life either. So you got that plus a crying baby plus everything that we've seen up to this point, and it's that terrifying. It's like, yeah, that's actually a pretty good recipe to freak me out. And again, that's saying a lot considering who I am and the kind of stuff I like. So kudos to them.
Good deal. Um, I find it kind of hard to pick favorite moments myself. The rabbit coming to life. The I do agree on the beheadings. I think that's kind of fun. And like I said, that little moment where the Hare and the Hatter then pick up the wrong heads and each put the other's head on and just keep on playing cards like nothing happened. And I just the scene or the rat where the rat is building a fire on her head. Just all those little moments. And then honestly, I really like the scenes of Alice as a doll. There's just something about it was like just the right blend of creepy and almost amusing.
I agree.
Well, and they make her especially vulnerable because that
Right,
doll, the design of that doll is very vulnerable looking, and she's so
right,
small and so helpless and all that stuff. It is
right.
kind of funny though with the building of the fire on her head or whatever. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was a moment that outside of like just having the stakes nailed into her head, I was like, I actually
Mm-hmm.
found that to be kind of funny because it did kind of
Right.
have I mean, it had a somewhat Gulliver's Travels feel to it in a weird way.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. But I just again the whole basically she's just like I'm just over this now, But again, obviously, I have to admit when it comes down to it, what was the thing more than anything else out of all these memorable things? What was the thing that stuck in my brain all these years? And that was just simply the refrain said the white rabbit. So I
Yeah,
gotta love that. That's just that.
and
That just amused
I
me.
liked hearing the original Czech of it,
Hmm.
and the so I cannot do the word
I'll have
correctly.
to
I'm
see.
sorry,
I have to hear
but
that
like
eventually.
the way that she says it and like the repetition of that
Hmm.
is very nice.
Hmm.
I like hearing foreign movies in their original language just because each
Hmm.
language kind of has a rhythmic kind of music to the language,
Hmm.
and you can kind of you get in you get a
Hmm.
feel for it, even if you can't understand the words, but you get the sound of it adds another layer of meaning.
And I just haven't gotten to hear enough Czech films. Like there was one, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe The Counterfeiters was a Czech film. That was a really good movie from a few years ago. But there, I've not seen very many, and I need to see more. And again, I would have watched this one in Czech. I realized too late that my version doesn't have that option. So it's a good placeholder until the inevitable Criterion release. I'm almost thinking I could see them doing this director's work as a set. Like I feel like that is probably going to be a thing. Uh,
This does
so
belong on the Criterion Collection.
right. But and then, like I said, even if they do this one individually, they're going to have to include Jabberwocky as a bonus feature, just to, because they like doing that. They like doing early short films from these directors, so that it fits their theme perfectly. But
Totally agreed on that one.
yeah. Anyway, I guess that probably about does her. Do we want to go ahead and do our outros?
Yes, we do.
Okay, well, Dane, why don't you kick us off?
Dane Kyle, filmmaker, and I guess I'm now considered to be a film educator now. I guess because so I say that because I've been working very diligently for months on a video review series called Oztober, where I review 31 Oz-related film and TV adaptations during the month of October on my channel, Dangerous Arts, DANEJUROUS, Dangerous Arts. And that's been going very well. I've been releasing each episode every day this month. This is the 5th day, and there's a lot more to come. Definitely check it out. But yeah, my neighbor slash friend has shared the first episode, and she kind of described me as a film educator. So I guess I'm that now, on top of being a filmmaker and all that stuff. But I'll take it. People need to be educated in films and art in general. So yes, definitely check out Oztober on Dangerous Arts on YouTube. And I do plan to take a deep dive into Alice in Wonderland adaptations. That'll probably be the next big month-long dive. But that's going to devote a lot more of my time to make that happen. So, but I guess thanks, Brandon, for getting me down that rabbit hole, pun intended.
All right. Forrest, how about you?
I'm Forrest. My name is Forrest Bennett. I'm an independent film producer based in Long Island, New York. I also have a YouTube channel where I just talk about movie pickups. Big movie and comic book enthusiast, and I always have something going on in the pipeline.
All right, sounds good. I guess we'll go Brandon, then me, and then Dave, and then we can hand it back to Brandon for schedule announcements, I guess.
Sure.
Okay, so Brandon.
Well, SeptumSin is SeptumSin versus the world. We love our physical media here. Pickups, new release info. Of course, we recently had the Versus Awards debut. So if you want to check that out, it's our very first Versus Awards. We're hoping to eventually do it again around this time next year. Hopefully, another channel will host, and we'll keep that going so that we can increase the popularity and increase that participation. But it was really fun. We really enjoyed doing it this year. And of course, we have a couple other things. The one major thing is we are starting our Horrorween month with a playthrough of the Gregory Horror Show. So far, I'm having Jake do the playthrough, and I'm there mostly commenting, though hopefully we'll have more on his side for the next episode. And we're just going to keep going and see if we can beat this game before we end up reviewing the anime in December. And on Thursday, we have an episode of the Anhedenia Project. which we haven't had one of those in a while, for the newest movie in Anhedenia Films, Death Toilet 4.
Oh, you
Alrighty.
gotta do the subtitle for that.
Brown snakes on a plane.
Yeah, there you go. And of course, I am the co-host of SeptumSin versus the World. I am also a movie fan, collector, what have you. I like to be active in whatever way I can with this film commentary. Every once in a while, actually being involved with a film when the opportunity arises, but that doesn't happen as often in this corner of the woods as we would like. But at any rate, I am mostly just very, very, very busy trying to start to work on my own personal second love or other love, which is of course plants. I have a business for that, and that is takes up a great deal of the time, which is why I'm a little bit narcoleptic. But I'm trying to fix that. But definitely check out the Versus Awards. We had a lot of fun with those. We put a lot of work in. I think it turned out pretty well. I've been watching Dane sing so far. It's turning out good so far. So definitely a lot of good stuff to recommend to y'all here. And thanks for joining us. Thanks to Movie Buff One for joining us and commenting earlier on, and to Chris, who again apparently ducked a little early, but good to get his insight on this too. And hand it to you, Dave.
Alrighty, my name is David Streggy. I am one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for joining us on this film journey. If this is your first time, definitely check out some of our other episodes. But this is definitely not the first time we've gone down the rabbit hole. But hopefully you enjoyed our discussion on Alice, and just continue to follow along with us if you can, and hopefully you enjoy. But I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where I go on about my own video pickups and video reviews, and also make sure that you check out some interviews that I'll be having with a couple of people this week. Last week I was on with director Joel Wynkoop, and this week I'll be continuing it with going on with him and his wife again tomorrow around 2 p.m. Central, 3 Eastern. And then the following day, I will be having a interview with a director by the name of Mark Pirro from Paramount or Piromount Pictures. So definitely check that out. Should be entertaining. But in any case, heading over to you, Brandon. Why don't you tell us what's more in store?
It's interesting. October is usually our time to do spooky tales and treats as time goes. Though our month seems to be shaping up a lot like our September was supposed to for Accidentally Scary, with this film, which was intended to be a children's film, and yet another children's film that seems to be slightly scary and creepy. From straight out of those Oztober vaults that Dane has with Return to Oz. So it's going to be
Yes.
fun next week.
I am
as
really
we-
looking forward to that. So what's the date on that one?
That will be next Tuesday.
What's
a
the
week from
date on
now.
it?
What's the date now? 5th, so 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 12th.
Okay, so those who tune into this particular show will be getting some of my thoughts about Return to Oz 3 days early in the Oztober schedule, because Return to Oz is actually going to be the 15th film that we look at for Oztober. So tune in here if you want to get some of my thoughts early on Return to Oz. Spoiler alert, it is one of my favorite Oz films, and I think it does quite a few things better than the 1939 film in terms of realizing the world of Oz on screen, at least if we're talking fidelity to the books and getting new insights from the original sources. So definitely check that out, and check out the Oztober episode on October 15th.
All right. Well, I guess
All
that's
right.
it. So we'll
Yeah.
say good night tonight.
Good night tonight,
Indeed.
Said the White Rabbit.
said the White Rabbit.
Said the animals.
I'm late for a very important day.